morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Catherine stood before her mirror, unaware that this single afternoon would spark conversations across the globe and forever change how the world saw her role within the royal family. What seemed like just another royal obligation would become the moment that defined her grace under pressure and showcased why she had become the people's princess in her own right. Behind the palace walls, preparations had been underway since dawn. Staff members hurried through corridors, florists arranged final touches on garden displays, and security teams conducted their final sweeps. But none of them knew that today's garden party would become more than just another royal event. It would become a testament to elegance, duty, and the quiet strength that had made Catherine a beloved figure worldwide. As she reached for the gown that would soon capture millions of hearts, Catherine had no idea that photographers were already positioning themselves for what would become some of the most celebrated royal photographs of the decade. The dress hanging before her wasn't just fabric and thread. It was about to become a symbol of modern royal style and grace. The morning of the palace garden party began, like many others in the royal household, with the quiet efficiency that marked every day in Catherine's life. She woke early, as was her custom, to the sound of birds singing outside her windows, and the distant hum of palace staff beginning their daily routines. The sun was just beginning to peek through the heavy curtains when she first heard the gentle knock on her door that signaled the start of what would become an extraordinary day. Her lady-in-waiting entered with the usual morning tea service, but there was an unmistakable energy in the air. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day of the summer garden party, one of the most anticipated events in the royal calendar. Catherine had attended many such gatherings before, but something felt different about this one. Perhaps it was the way the morning light seemed particularly golden, or the way the palace grounds looked especially magnificent from her window, but she sensed this day would be memorable. As she sipped her morning tea, Catherine reviewed the day's schedule one more time. The garden party was set to begin at 3 in the afternoon, which meant she had several hours to prepare. The guest list included diplomats, charity workers, community leaders, and members of the public who had been recognized for their outstanding contributions to society. It was exactly the kind of event she cherished, one where she could meet real people doing remarkable things in their communities. Her stylist arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, carrying with her the carefully selected gown that had been chosen weeks in advance. The dress was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a flowing creation in the softest shade of blue that seemed to capture the very essence of a perfect summer sky. The fabric moved like water, and the subtle embroidery along the neckline and sleeves caught the light in the most enchanting way. It was the kind of dress that spoke of confidence without ostentation, of grace without trying too hard. Catherine had always believed that her clothing choices were more than just personal preference. They were a form of communication with the people she served. Every outfit was carefully considered not just for its beauty, but for what it said about respect for the occasion and the people she would meet. This particular gown struck exactly the right note. Elegant enough for a royal garden party, but approachable enough that the guests would feel comfortable speaking with her. The preparation process was meticulous, but not rushed. Catherine's hair was styled in an elegant updo that would withstand the afternoon breeze while still looking effortless. Her makeup was applied with a light touch, enough to look polished in photographs, but natural enough that she remained recognizably herself. She had learned early in her royal role that authenticity was far more valuable than perfection, and she made sure that even on the most formal occasions, her genuine warmth could shine through. Meanwhile, throughout the palace and grounds, an army of staff members was working to ensure every detail was perfect. The gardeners had been up since dawn, making final adjustments to flower arrangements and ensuring every blade of grass was pristine. The catering team was putting finishing touches on an elaborate spread that would accommodate dietary restrictions and preferences while showcasing the finest British cuisine. Security personnel conducted their final briefings and walkthroughs, ensuring the guests would be safe while still feeling welcome and unencumbered. William had his own preparations to complete, but they found moments throughout the morning to check in with each other. Their partnership in these events was seamless after years of working together, and they had developed an intuitive understanding of how to support each other during public appearances. He admired her natural ability to make every person she met feel special and valued, while she appreciated his steadiness and his gift for remembering important details about the people they encountered. As the morning progressed, Catherine took time to review briefing notes about some of the guests she would meet. There was Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, an 89-year-old who had spent decades volunteering at a children's hospital. There was James Martinez, a young teacher who had created an innovative program for disadvantaged students. There was Sarah Chen, who had started a community garden that now fed dozens of families. Each person had a story worth hearing, and Catherine wanted to be prepared to engage meaningfully with each of them. The palace kitchens were a symphony of organized chaos as chefs and servers prepared for the afternoon's festivities. Traditional afternoon tea fare was being prepared alongside modern interpretations of classic recipes. There would be delicate sandwiches with the crusts carefully removed, scones with clotted cream and jam, and an array of pastries that looked almost too beautiful to eat. But there would also be options for guests with different dietary needs and cultural preferences, because Catherine and William had always insisted that royal hospitality should be inclusive and welcoming to all. By noon, Catherine was fully dressed and ready, but she took a few quiet moments to herself before the day's activities began in earnest. She walked through her private garden, breathing in the scent of roses and listening to the peaceful sounds of the palace grounds. These moments of solitude were precious to her. They helped her center herself and remember the deeper purpose behind all the ceremony and protocol. She thought about the people she would meet this afternoon, about their stories of service and sacrifice and simple human kindness. These were the interactions that made all the formal aspects of royal life worthwhile. In a few hours, she would have the privilege of thanking them personally for their contributions to their communities, and that responsibility felt both humbling and energizing. The dress moved beautifully as she walked, the fabric catching the light and the gentle breeze in ways that made her feel both elegant and comfortable. She had chosen her jewelry carefully, pieces that were meaningful rather than simply valuable, including a brooch that had belonged to William's grandmother and earrings that had been a wedding gift from her own family. These personal touches helped her feel connected to the people she loved even during public appearances. As she made her way back inside, Catherine could see the final preparations taking place in the gardens below. Tables were being set with fine china and fresh flowers. A small stage was being prepared for the military band that would provide entertainment, and red carpets were being rolled out along the paths where she and William would walk with their guests. The entire scene looked like something from a fairy tale, but she knew that the real magic would come from the conversations and connections that would take place once the guests arrived. The anticipation was building, not just for Catherine, but for everyone involved in making the day special. Palace staff took pride in these events, knowing that they were helping to create memories that guests would treasure for the rest of their lives. For many of the invited guests, this would be their first and perhaps only visit to a royal palace, and everyone wanted to ensure it would be an experience they would never forget. Catherine spent the final hour before the garden party began reviewing last-minute details with her private secretary and making sure she was fully briefed on any changes to the day's schedule. But even as she focused on these practical matters, she couldn't shake the feeling that this afternoon held something special in store. Perhaps it was simply the perfect weather and the beautiful setting, or perhaps it was her genuine excitement about meeting the remarkable people who had been invited to attend. As 3 o'clock approached, and she prepared to make her way to the gardens, Catherine took one final look in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was polished and elegant, certainly, but more importantly, she looked ready to do what she did best, connect with people and make them feel valued and appreciated. The gown was beautiful, but it was simply the frame for what really mattered: her genuine warmth and interest in the people she was privileged to serve. The palace gardens had been transformed into something truly magical by the time Catherine and William emerged from the main entrance to greet their guests. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, and the carefully tended flower beds were at their absolute peak of summer beauty. Roses climbed ancient stone walls, their fragrance mixing with the scent of freshly cut grass and the delicate sweetness of honeysuckle that draped over garden arbors. The scene was picture-perfect, but Catherine knew that the real beauty of the afternoon would come from the people they were about to meet. As they walked down the stone steps toward the garden, Catherine could see the guests already gathering on the expansive lawn. There were several hundred people present, each one carefully selected for their contributions to their communities or their service to others. She could see elderly veterans proudly wearing their medals, young entrepreneurs who were making a difference in their neighborhoods, teachers and nurses and volunteers who formed the backbone of British society. The sight filled her with the familiar warmth she always felt at these events, the knowledge that she was about to spend the afternoon with genuinely inspiring people. The couple's entrance was marked by the gentle sound of the military band playing a welcoming tune, and Catherine noticed how the music seemed to put everyone at ease. Guests who had perhaps been feeling nervous about attending such a formal event began to relax and smile as they realized this was going to be a celebration rather than a stuffy royal obligation. This was exactly the atmosphere Catherine had hoped for. Elegant but warm, formal but welcoming. Their first stop was to greet a group of healthcare workers who had been recognised for their exceptional service during particularly challenging times. Catherine found herself in conversation with Dr. Balmer, Margaret Foster, a paediatric nurse who had spent 40 years caring for sick children and their families. As Dr. Chen. Foster described her work, Catherine listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the challenges and rewards of such demanding but vital work. The conversation flowed naturally, and Catherine was struck once again by how much she learned from the people she met at these events. William, meanwhile, was speaking with a group of young people who had started innovative community programs. His natural ease with conversation and his genuine interest in their work created an atmosphere where the young entrepreneurs felt comfortable sharing their ideas and their dreams for making their communities better. Catherine watched him from the corner of her eye, admiring, as she always did, his ability to make people feel heard and valued. As they moved through the garden, stopping to speak with different groups of guests, Catherine became aware that photographers were capturing moments throughout the afternoon. But rather than feeling self-conscious about being photographed, she found herself completely absorbed in the conversations she was having. When she was later shown some of the images from the day, she would be surprised by how natural and relaxed she looked. But in the moment, she was simply focused on connecting with the remarkable people around her. The formal receiving line gave way to a more relaxed mingling period, and Catherine found herself drawn into a conversation with Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, the 89-year-old volunteer she had read about in her briefing notes. Mrs. Thompson had a sparkle in her eyes and a warmth that immediately put Catherine at ease. As they talked about her decades of volunteer work at the Children's Hospital, Catherine was struck by the older woman's energy and passion for helping others. "The children keep me young," Mrs. Beth Thompson explained with a laugh. "When you're around that much joy and resilience every day, you can't help but feel hopeful about the world." Catherine found herself thinking about her own children and how she hoped to instill in them the same spirit of service that had driven Mrs. Thompson for so many years. The afternoon tea service began with military precision but felt relaxed and social. Tables had been set up throughout the garden, and guests found themselves seated with people they might never have met otherwise. A retired teacher sharing stories with a young social worker. A veteran comparing experiences with a modern-day community leader. Catherine and William moved from table to table, spending time with each group and ensuring that everyone felt included in the celebration. At one table, Catherine found herself in an animated discussion about education with James Martinez, the innovative teacher she had read about. His passion for his students was infectious, and Catherine found herself asking detailed questions about his methods and his hopes for educational reform. She had always believed that education was one of the most powerful tools for positive change, and conversations like this one reinforced her commitment to supporting educational initiatives. The military band provided a perfect soundtrack to the afternoon, playing a mix of traditional and contemporary pieces that appealed to guests of all ages. During one particularly lovely piece, Catherine noticed several elderly guests swaying gently to the music, and she saw a young couple sharing a quiet moment together. These small human moments were what made these events truly special, the way people connected not just with the royal hosts, but with each other. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine became aware that her gown was photographing beautifully in the garden setting. The soft blue fabric seemed to complement the natural colors around her, and the way it moved in the gentle breeze created an almost ethereal effect. But more importantly, she felt comfortable and confident in what she was wearing, which allowed her to focus completely on her interactions with guests, rather than worrying about her appearance. William caught her eye across the garden and smiled, a look that said he was enjoying the afternoon as much as she was. They had developed such a strong partnership over the years that they could communicate volumes with just a glance. She could see that he was having the same kind of meaningful conversation she was, and she felt grateful once again for the way they supported each other in their public role. The garden party reached its peak when Catherine was introduced to Sarah Chen, the young woman who had started the community garden. Sarah's story was particularly moving. She had transformed a vacant lot in one of London's most disadvantaged neighbourhoods into a thriving space where families could grow their own food and children could learn about nature. As Sarah described the challenges she had faced and the support she had received from her community, Catherine found herself deeply inspired by this young woman's determination and vision. "It started with just a few packets of seeds," Sarah explained, her eyes lighting up as she talked about her project. "But when people saw what was possible, they wanted to be part of it. Now we have families from dozens of different backgrounds working together, sharing knowledge and sharing meals made from food they've grown themselves. Catherine was fascinated by the social aspects of the project, the way the garden had brought together people who might otherwise never have interacted, creating a true community in the process. She asked thoughtful questions about sustainability and about Sarah's plans for expanding the project, and she could see that her genuine interest meant a great deal to the young woman. Throughout these conversations, palace staff moved seamlessly through the crowd, ensuring that every guest felt cared for and that the afternoon ran smoothly. Catherine noticed their quiet professionalism and felt grateful for the way they helped create an atmosphere where meaningful connections could flourish. From the servers offering perfectly timed refreshments to the security personnel who remained virtually invisible while keeping everyone safe, every detail was managed with skill and discretion. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the garden, Catherine realized that the afternoon was drawing to a close. But rather than feeling tired, she felt energized by all the inspiring people she had met and the stories she had heard. Each conversation had reminded her of why she felt so privileged to serve in her role, the opportunity to recognize and celebrate the people who make their communities better through their daily actions. The final formal element of the garden party was a brief speech from William, thanking the guests for their service and for taking time to join them for the afternoon. As he spoke, Catherine looked out over the crowd of faces, some familiar from previous events, others completely new to her, but all of them representing the very best of human nature. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to spend time with such remarkable people. As guests began to make their way toward the palace exits, many stopped to thank Catherine and William for the afternoon. The genuine warmth of these farewells, the promises to stay in touch about various projects, and the obvious joy that guests had experienced made all the preparation and formality worthwhile. Catherine found herself already looking forward to hearing updates about the community garden, the innovative teaching programs, and all the other inspiring work that had been represented at the party. The photographers had captured countless images throughout the afternoon, but Catherine knew that the real memories were the ones being carried away by the guests, the conversations they had shared, the connections they had made with each other, and the feeling that their work and service had been truly seen and valued. As the garden began to empty and the palace staff started the process of cleaning up, Catherine felt a deep satisfaction about how the afternoon had unfolded. As the last of the guests departed and the garden gradually returned to its peaceful evening state, Catherine found herself walking slowly through the now quiet spaces where so much joy and connection had filled the afternoon. The tables were being cleared by efficient palace staff, but traces of the celebration lingered everywhere. A forgotten napkin on a garden bench, the lingering scent of the elaborate flower arrangements, and the way the grass still showed the gentle impression of where hundreds of people had gathered to celebrate service and community spirit. William joined her as she paused beside the rose garden, where she had spent so much time in conversation with Mrs. Thompson and the other volunteers. The evening light was soft and golden, and Catherine could see that he was feeling the same mixture of satisfaction and reflection that always followed their most successful public events. They walked together in comfortable silence for a few moments, both processing the richness of the afternoon and the remarkable people they had been privileged to meet. "That was something special," William said quietly, echoing the thoughts Catherine had been having. "Did you see how Dr. Foster lit up when she talked about those children? And James, his passion for education was infectious. These are the events that remind me why we do this work." Catherine nodded, thinking about each of the conversations she had experienced throughout the day. "Sarah's community garden project particularly struck me," she replied. "The way she described bringing together families from such different backgrounds, creating something beautiful and practical at the same time. There's something about people who see possibilities where others see problems that I find incredibly inspiring." As they made their way back toward the palace, Catherine caught sight of herself in one of the tall windows that lined the garden facade. The gown that had felt so perfect at the beginning of the day now told the story of the afternoon. A slight wrinkle from where she had knelt down to speak with a young child, a subtle grass stain along the hem from walking across the lawn, and a general softness to the fabric that spoke of hours spent in genuine conversation and connection. Rather than feeling disheveled, she felt authentically herself. Inside the palace, her private secretary was waiting with the initial feedback from the afternoon's event. The photographers had captured some truly stunning images, and early reports suggested that the garden party had been exactly the kind of celebration of community service that had been hoped for. But Catherine was most interested in the more personal feedback, the thank you notes that had already begun arriving from guests, and the stories about connections that had been made between attendees who had discovered shared interests or complementary projects. One message particularly touched her. It was from Mrs. Thompson, who had written to thank them for the afternoon, but more importantly, to share that she had connected with several of the younger volunteers and was excited about the possibility of mentoring them in their own service projects. Today reminded me that the work we do matters, the elderly woman had written, and that there are wonderful people in every generation who care about making the world better. Catherine showed the note to William, and they both smiled at this perfect example of why these events were so much more than just royal obligations. The formal aspects, the protocol, the ceremony, the beautiful setting, were all in service of creating opportunities for genuine human connection and recognition. When they worked well, as today's garden party clearly had, they became catalysts for ongoing relationship and collaboration. The palace staff who had worked so hard to make the day successful were beginning to finish their cleanup duties, and Catherine made a point of personally thanking as many of them as possible. She had learned early in her royal role that events like this succeeded because of the dedication and professionalism of dozens of people working behind the scenes, and she never wanted to take their efforts for granted. Their obvious pride in the day's success was evident in their faces, and many of them shared their own favorite moments from the afternoon. "The way you spent so much time with each person," commented Maria, one of the servers who had worked previous royal events. "You could see how much it meant to them."
Mrs.
Thompson was practically glowing when she left. As Catherine finally made her way to her private quarters, she reflected on how the day had exceeded even her optimistic expectations. The garden party had accomplished everything they had hoped for, recognizing deserving individuals, creating a beautiful celebration of service, and providing opportunities for meaningful conversation and connection. But it had also generated something unexpected and precious, genuine new relationships and collaborations that would continue long after the formal event had ended. The process of changing out of the elegant gown felt almost ceremonial. As her dresser carefully hung the garment, Catherine found herself thinking about all the conversations and moments the dress had witnessed throughout the day. Fashion magazines would undoubtedly feature photographs of the gown in the coming days, analyzing its style and significance, but Catherine knew that its real purpose had been to help her feel confident and comfortable while connecting with remarkable people. Her evening routine felt especially peaceful after such a fulfilling day. As she removed her jewelry and let down her hair, Catherine thought about the various projects and organizations she had learned about during the afternoon. Several of them seemed like natural fits for her own charitable interests, and she made mental notes about following up to see how she might be able to offer support or amplification for their work. The photograph reviews that evening revealed just how special the day had been. The images captured not just the formal beauty of the event, the elegant gown, the stunning garden setting, the perfect summer weather, but also the genuine warmth and connection that had characterized every interaction. In photograph after photograph, Catherine could see the evidence of real conversation and mutual interest. These weren't the stiff, formal images that sometimes resulted from royal events, but pictures that told a story of celebration and human connection. William joined her as she reviewed some of the images, and they found themselves reliving favorite moments from the afternoon through the photographer's lens. There was the moment when Catherine had laughed delightedly at something Mrs. Thompson had said. There was William deep in animated conversation with the young entrepreneurs, clearly fascinated by their innovative approaches to community problems. There were wide shots showing the beautiful integration of formal royal protocol with genuine warmth and accessibility. "Look at this one," William said, pointing to an image of Catherine speaking intently with Sarah Chen while both women gestured towards something beyond the frame, probably Sarah describing her community garden project. "You can see how engaged you both are." These are the photographs that really capture what these events are about. As they prepared for bed, Catherine found herself already looking forward to the follow-up work that would come from the day's connections. She wanted to learn more about several of the projects she had heard about, and she was excited about the possibility of featuring some of these inspiring individuals in future royal initiatives. The garden party had been beautiful and successful as a standalone event, but its real value would be measured in the ongoing relationships and support that grew from the initial connections. The final task of the evening was reviewing the preliminary press coverage of the event. Early reports were overwhelmingly positive, focusing not just on the visual beauty of the day but on the substantive conversations and the quality of the guests who had been honored. Several articles specifically mentioned the relaxed, genuine atmosphere that had characterized the afternoon, and the way both Catherine and William had clearly enjoyed learning about the work being done by their guests. One fashion blog had already posted about Catherine's gown, calling it the perfect balance of elegance and accessibility, and noting how the style had allowed her to move comfortably through the crowd and engage naturally with guests. But Catherine was more interested in the articles that focused on the guests themselves and their remarkable work. The real success of the day would be measured not in fashion coverage, but in whether the event had succeeded in recognizing and celebrating the service of deserving individuals. As she finally settled into bed, Catherine felt the deep satisfaction that came from a day well spent. The garden party had been everything she had hoped for: a celebration of service, an opportunity for meaningful connection, and a reminder of the remarkable work being done by ordinary people in communities across the country. The elegant gown and beautiful setting had provided the perfect framework for what really mattered: honoring people who dedicate their lives to making the world better. The last thing Catherine saw before drifting off to sleep was the beautiful view from her bedroom window of the garden where so much joy and connection had been shared that afternoon. The space looked peaceful and serene in the moonlight, but she knew that for hundreds of guests it would forever be remembered as the place where their service was recognized and celebrated by people who truly understood its value. In the days that followed, thank you notes and follow-up messages would continue to arrive, sharing stories about connections made and collaborations begun during the garden party. New friendships would develop, projects would receive unexpected support, and the ripple effects of one beautiful afternoon would continue to spread through communities across Britain. For Catherine, this was the real measure of success. Not just a lovely event, but a catalyst for ongoing positive change that would outlast any newspaper coverage or photograph.